The blizzard howled with an unforgiving fury, sending knife-like shards of ice against the lone cabin, nestled deep within the frost-covered forest of Frosthorn. Inside, Jonas Dunn stoked the dying embers of his fireplace, his weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency. The wind screamed like a wounded animal outside his reinforced windows. But the sound barely registered anymore. After 5 winters on this desolate planet, he had grown accustomed to nature's tantrums. Jonas was a collector, a scavenger of drone parts that fell from the skies during the planet's notorious electrical storms. The isolated life suited him, far from the politics of the Galactic Council and the rigid cultural practices of the native Frostborn clans. Here, in his small wooden sanctuary, he answered to no one but himself. He pulled his thermal jacket tighter and peered through the frost-covered window. The storm was intensifying, which meant tomorrow's hunt would be particularly fruitful. Damaged drones would litter the frozen landscape like metallic fruits waiting to be harvested. First light, he muttered to himself, watching as his breath formed delicate clouds in the still, chilly cabin air. First light, and I'll head north, toward the ridge. With that decision made, Jonas settled into his chair, listening to the occasional crack of the fire and the persistent howl of the wind. Sleep would come eventually, as it always did, accompanied by dreams of warmer places he'd never see again. Morning arrived with a deceptive stillness. The storm had abated, leaving behind a pristine landscape of undisturbed snow that sparkled under the pale blue light of Frosthorn's distant sun. Jonas dressed methodically, layering insulated fabrics and pulling on his reinforced boots. His collection pack, filled with tools for extracting valuable components from downed drones, hung ready by the door. The air bit at his exposed face as he stepped outside, but Jonas barely flinched. The temperature gauge on his wrist display read 47 degrees Celsius, cold, but manageable. He began trudging through the knee-deep snow, following his planned northern route toward the ridge where drone debris most frequently accumulated. An hour into his journey, something unusual caught his eye: a series of small indentations in the snow, forming a meandering path through the trees. Jonas paused, crouching to examine them more closely. They were footprints, but unlike any he had seen before. Too small for an adult human, too distinct to belong to any of Frosthorn's native fauna. Child-sized, he murmured, his brow furrowing. But there were no human children on Frosthorn. The planet was too harsh, too unforgiving for families. The only permanent human residents were solitary figures like himself, outcasts, exiles, or those seeking absolute isolation. Curiosity piqued. Jonas abandoned his original route and began following the mysterious tracks. They weaved erratically through the forest, sometimes disappearing where the snow had drifted deeper, then reappearing several meters ahead. Whoever had made them was small, unsteady, and based on the pattern, likely exhausted. The trail led him to a fallen tree, its massive trunk partially buried in snow. At first, Jonas saw nothing unusual, just another feature of the frozen landscape. But then, a slight movement caught his eye. Near the exposed roots of the fallen giant was what appeared to be a small mound of snow, distinctly different from its surroundings. Jonas approached cautiously, his heart rate accelerating. As he drew closer, the mound took shape, the outline of a tiny figure, almost entirely covered in snow, curled into a protective ball against the base of the tree. With gentle movements, Jonas brushed away the snow, revealing what lay beneath. His breath caught in his throat. It was a child, but not a human child. The small figure had delicate, violet-hued skin, now alarmingly tinged with blue from the cold. The face was humanoid, but with distinct alien features. Slightly pointed ears, no visible eyebrows, and a pattern of subtle ridges along the temples. The child appeared female, perhaps 6 or 7 years of age by human standards. dressed in torn fabric that provided almost no protection against Frosthorn's lethal cold. "Hey," Jonas said softly, removing his glove to check for a pulse. The skin was ice cold to the touch, but as his fingers pressed against the child's neck, he felt the faintest flutter, a heartbeat, weak but present. "You're alive. How are you alive in this?" The child made no response, her eyes remaining closed, her tiny body motionless, save for the almost imperceptible rise and fall of her chest. Jonas faced a decision. The responsible action would be to contact the Galactic Council outpost, report finding an alien child, and wait for their retrieval team. But the nearest outpost was 3 days' journey away, and the child wouldn't survive that long without immediate attention. As he debated, the child's eyes fluttered open briefly, large. Silver irises gazed at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope before closing again. Too weak to remain conscious. That fleeting moment of connection made the decision for him. Jonas removed his outer thermal layer and carefully wrapped it around the child's tiny form. With as much gentleness as his calloused hands could manage, he lifted her from the snow. She weighed almost nothing, her body limp in his arms. "Hang on, little one," he whispered. "Just hang on." With the child secured against his chest, Jonas turned back toward his cabin, moving as quickly as the deep snow would allow. The bitter cold penetrated his reduced layers, but he barely noticed, focused entirely on the fragile life he carried. By the time he reached his cabin, his own extremities were numb from cold, but the child was his only concern. He shouldered the door open and headed straight for the fireplace, where embers still glowed faintly from the morning's fire. Working swiftly, Jonas built up the fire until it roared with life, then carefully laid the child on his cot, which he had dragged close to the heat source. He removed the snow-dampened outer wrapping and replaced it with every blanket he possessed, creating a cocoon of warmth around the small, still form. Next came the emergency heat patches, self-activating thermal compresses he kept for his own potential injuries. Jonas placed them strategically, one at the back of the neck, one over the heart, and one at each wrist, where major blood vessels would carry the warmth throughout the tiny body. "Come on," he urged, watching the child's face for any sign of improvement. "Come back." For nearly an hour, Jonas maintained his vigil, alternating between stoking the fire and checking the child's vital signs. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the blue tinge began to recede from her skin, the natural violet hue returning. Her breathing deepened, and the pulse at her neck grew stronger. When the child finally stirred, it was with a sudden, gasping intake of breath, as though she had been underwater and had just reached the surface. Her eyes, those extraordinary silver eyes, flew open, darting around in panic before focusing on Jonas's face. Instinctively, she tried to retreat, pressing herself against the wall behind the cot, pulling the blankets tighter around her small form. "It's okay," Jonas said, keeping his distance, hands raised to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here. I found you in the snow. You were dying." The child made no verbal response, but her eyes never left his face, studying him with an intensity that seemed far beyond her apparent years. "My name is Jonas," he continued, keeping his voice soft and even. "Jonas Dunn. This is my home. You can stay here until you're better." He gestured to the fire, the blankets, trying to communicate through actions what his words might not convey. Still, the child remained silent, though the fear in her eyes had diminished somewhat, replaced by cautious observation. "Are you hungry?" Jonas moved slowly to his small cooking area, retrieving a container of soup he had prepared days earlier. He warmed it over the fire, aware of the child's gaze following his every movement. When the soup was hot, Jonas poured a small amount into a cup and offered it to the child. setting it down within her reach before backing away. After a moment's hesitation, she reached for it with trembling hands, bringing it to her lips for a tentative sip. It seemed to meet with approval as she continued drinking, her eyes now alternating between watching Jonas and focusing on the life-giving nourishment. "That's it," Jonas encouraged, "nice and slow." As evening approached, the child had finished the soup and accepted a second cup, though she still hadn't spoken or moved from her defensive position against the wall. Jonas busied himself with ordinary tasks, trying to establish a sense of normalcy, all while contemplating the extraordinary situation he found himself in. The child was clearly not human, nor did she belong to any of the local Frostborn clans, whose members had distinctive ice-blue skin and towering stature. So where had she come from? How had she ended up alone in the frozen forest? And what would he do with her now? As darkness fell, Jonas prepared for the night, setting up a makeshift bed for himself on the floor near the fire, leaving the cot for his unexpected guest. The child watched his preparations with that same unnerving intensity, her silver eyes reflecting the firelight. "Try to sleep," Jonas told her, settling into his blankets. "You're safe here." Whether she understood his words or merely succumbed to exhaustion, the child eventually lay down, though Jonas noted she positioned herself to keep him in view even as her eyelids drooped. Eventually, her breathing deepened into the rhythm of sleep. Jonas remained awake much longer, watching the rise and fall of the small chest, wondering what sequence of events had brought this child to his doorstep, and what consequences might follow his decision to take her in. Morning revealed new concerns. As daylight filtered through the cabin's small windows, Jonas was able to get a better look at his guest. The child was awake, sitting upright on the cot, still wrapped in blankets, her silver eyes tracking his movements as he rekindled the fire. What caught his attention now, visible in the morning light, was a marking on the child's shoulder, a symbol burned or branded into the violet skin, partially visible where the blanket had slipped. It appeared to be a stylized snowflake, intersected by a jagged line, the surrounding tissue scarred and discolored. Jonas recognized it immediately, and his blood ran cold. It was the mark of the Frostborn, specifically, their ritual designation for the outcast, the abandoned, the cursed. The Frostborn clans were known throughout the galaxy for their harsh customs, but none was more notorious than their practice of abandoning children deemed defective or different. The realization struck Jonas like a physical blow. This child hadn't accidentally wandered into the forest. She had been deliberately left there to die, following an ancient and cruel tradition. "They did this to you," he said, more to himself than to the child. "They marked you and left you in the snow." The child's hand moved to cover the mark, her eyes lowering for the first time since she had awakened in his cabin. It was a gesture of shame, of understanding, that no child should comprehend. Jonas felt a surge of anger toward the Frostborn elders, toward their unyielding adherence to traditions that caused such suffering. But anger would not help this child. Action would. "You need a name," he said, approaching slowly and kneeling to be at eye level with her. "At least, I need something to call you. Can you understand me at all?" The child looked at him for a long moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Good, that's good," Jonas smiled encouragingly. "Do you have a name? Can you tell me?" No verbal response came, but the child's brow furrowed in concentration, as though trying to find a way to communicate. "It's okay if you can't speak," Jonas assured her. "We'll figure something out." After a moment's thought, he pointed to himself. "Jonas," he said clearly, then pointed questioningly at her. The child hesitated, then lifted a hand and touched her chest. Her lips moved, but only a whisper of sound emerged. Nothing Jonas could decipher. "Let's try again later," he said gently. "For now, I need to call you something." He thought for a moment. "How about Ira?" It was my grandmother's name. She was tough, like you. Survived things no one thought she could. The child tilted her head slightly, considering, then gave another small nod. Ira it is, then, Jonas said, feeling oddly pleased. Now, let's get some more food into you, and then I need to take a look at that mark on your shoulder. I want to make sure it's not infected. He prepared a simple meal of reconstituted protein and dried fruit, which Ira accepted more readily than the previous day's offerings. As she ate, Jonas gathered his limited medical supplies, antiseptic, bandages, and a healing salve he had traded for during his last visit to the outpost. This might sting, he warned as he approached with the supplies, miming a cleaning motion so she would understand his intentions. But I need to clean that wound. Ira remained perfectly still as Jonas gently pulled back the blanket to expose the marked shoulder. Up close, the wound was even more disturbing, a deliberate burn, precisely applied to form the distinctive symbol. It had partially healed, but showed signs of frostbite around the edges, the tissue dry and discolored. As carefully as possible, Jonas cleaned the area, applied the salve, and covered it with a light bandage. Throughout the procedure, Ira made no sound, though her small body tensed when the antiseptic touched the raw areas. Brave girl, Jonas murmured, securing the bandage in place. That's all done now. Just as he was putting away the medical supplies, a sound froze him in place, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps in snow, approaching the cabin. Jonas immediately moved to the window, peering out cautiously. A tall, imposing figure was making its way toward the cabin, dressed in the distinctive layered armor of the Frostborn elite. The visitor's skin had the characteristic ice blue tint of the native species, and the elaborate headpiece marked him as a person of significant rank, a blood judge, one of the clan's enforcers of traditional law. Jonas turned to Ira, who had gone rigid with fear, her silver eyes wide and fixed on the door. "Hide!" Jonas whispered urgently, pointing to the storage compartment beneath the floorboards where he kept his most valuable salvage. "Quickly!" Without hesitation, Ira slipped from the cot and into the hidden space, her movements fluid and silent despite her recent ordeal. Jonas closed the concealed door just as a heavy knock sounded. Taking a deep breath to compose himself, Jonas opened the door, coming face to face with a Frostborn official. "Carrick, blood judge of the Northern Wastes," the visitor announced, his voice deep and resonant, carrying the distinctive harmonic undertone of his species. "I seek entrance to your dwelling. Human." "Jonas Dunn," Jonas replied, stepping back to allow the visitor inside, knowing refusal would only arouse suspicion. "What brings a blood judge to my cabin? I've broken no laws of your people." Carrick ducked to enter the small doorway, his towering form nearly reaching the cabin ceiling once inside. His pale eyes surveyed the space with methodical precision. "You have taken something that belongs to us," Carrick stated, his tone flat and emotionless. "A marked child was abandoned in accordance with our laws. She is no longer alive in the snow, which means someone has interfered." Jonas maintained a neutral expression, though internally his heart raced. "I've seen no child. I live alone here." Carrick's gaze fixed on Jonas, unnervingly steady. "The tracks lead to your dwelling, human. Our drones followed them before the new snow covered the evidence." "Many tracks lead to my cabin," Jonas countered. "I walk the forest daily, gathering salvage." "Not these tracks." Carrick moved further into the cabin, his armored form dominating the small space. "These were the tracks of the marked one, followed by your larger prince, returning here." "Where is she?" Jonas abandoned the pretense, straightening to his full height, though he still stood a head shorter than the Frostborn judge. "Why do you care? You left her to die. By your own laws. She was discarded, abandoned. The symbol on her shoulder signifies she is without value," Carrick stated, Our law demands such children be returned to the ice. By interfering, you challenge the fundamental tenets of our society. She's a child, Jonas responded, anger rising in his voice. If your laws demand the death of children, then perhaps your laws are the problem. Carrick's expression remained impassive, but a subtle shift in his stance suggested Jonas's words had struck a nerve. Return the marked one to me, or blood will be shed here today. I told you, there's no child here, Jonas insisted, moving subtly to position himself between Carrick and the hidden compartment. And even if there were, I wouldn't hand a child over to those who abandoned her to die. For a tense moment, Carrick seemed to consider physical action, his hand moving toward the ceremonial blade at his waist. Then, unexpectedly, he stepped back. I will return, the blood judge stated, his voice cold with certainty. When I do, I will take the marked one, with or without your cooperation. The laws of Frostborn cannot be defied without consequence. With that, Carrick turned and ducked through the doorway, his tall form disappearing into the swirling snow that had begun to fall again outside. Jonas waited until he could no longer hear the Frostborn's footsteps before rushing to the hidden compartment. It's safe now, he said, lifting the concealed door. He's gone. Ira emerged slowly, her small body trembling, eyes darting toward the cabin door, as though expecting Carrick to reappear at any moment. He won't take you, Jonas promised, kneeling to meet her gaze. I won't let that happen. The child looked at him with an expression that suggested she wanted to believe him, but had learned harsh lessons about the reliability of such promises. Jonas knew they couldn't stay in the cabin. Now that the Frostborn were aware of Ira's presence, they would return in greater numbers, and while Jonas was skilled at survival, he was no match for a Frostborn hunting party. We need to leave, he told Ira, moving quickly to gather essential supplies. There's an outpost of the Galactic Council 3 days' journey from here. If we can reach it, they'll help us. They have rules against what the Frostborn tried to do to you. As Jonas packed food, medical supplies, and cold weather gear into his sturdiest bag, he explained the plan to Ira, unsure how much she understood, but needing to fill the silence with something other than his growing anxiety. We'll travel at night, he said, wrapping Ira in layers of his smallest clothes, which still engulfed her tiny frame. The Frostborn preferred daylight for tracking. We'll use the darkness to our advantage. Just as Jonas finished securing the last of their supplies, a new sound penetrated the cabin walls, a high-pitched, mechanical whine that he recognized immediately. Drones, he muttered, moving to the window. Outside, barely visible through the falling snow, hovered 3 sleek, black orbs, not the salvage drones he was accustomed to hunting, but smaller, more agile units designed for pursuit and capture. These weren't Frostborn technology. These were the tools of soul extractors, mercenaries who specialized in capturing special individuals for research or worse. Change of plans, Jonas told Ira urgently. We leave now. Those aren't Frostborn outside. There's something worse. Ira's eyes widened as she recognized the sound, a small whimper escaping her lips, the first vocal sound Jonas had heard from her. Her fear was palpable, suggesting she had encountered soul extractors before. The back way, Jonas decided, moving to another concealed door, this one leading to a narrow tunnel he had dug as an emergency exit during his first winter. Stay close to me. They had just entered the cramped passage when the cabin door burst open, the whine of the drones now deafening in the enclosed space. Jonas heard the methodical movements of the extractors as they searched the cabin, their boots heavy on the wooden floor directly above their heads. Emit Flare Level 5 Emotional Signature. Prepare containment, a mechanical voice announced, the extractor's neural-linked communication system. Jonas froze, confused. Flare-level emotional signature was not a term he was familiar with, but it clearly referred to Ira. Was this why she had been marked? Because she possessed some quality these mercenaries valued? There was no time to ponder the question. Jonas urged Ira forward through the tunnel, emerging eventually into a small clearing 50 meters behind the cabin. The snow was falling heavily now, which would help cover their tracks, but also made travel more difficult and visibility poor. "This way," Jonas whispered, lifting Ira into his arms to prevent her small feet from leaving prints in the snow. "We need to reach the ice bridge before they realize we've gone." He had taken only a few steps when the air around them seemed to shift, growing unexpectedly warmer. Jonas turned to see a bizarre sight: the 3 soul extractor drones spinning erratically, their sleek surfaces glowing with an unnatural heat, steam rising where snowflakes touched them. Behind the malfunctioning drones, 2 of the 3 black-clad extractors had collapsed in the snow, while the third staggered, clutching his head as though in intense pain. Jonas glanced down at Ira, who was staring intently at the scene, her silver eyes now glowing with an inner light, small hands clenched into fists at her sides. The air around her seemed to shimmer, as though heat waves were rising from her tiny form. "Are you doing that?" Jonas asked in amazement. Ira turned her gaze to him, and he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. Not his own, but hers, projected somehow directly into his mind: fear, determination, and a desperate plea to run. Without further questions, Jonas scooped her up and sprinted into the forest. Understanding now why she had been marked, why the extractors sought her, why the Frostborn had abandoned her. Ira was a flare-marked, one of the rare individuals born with the ability to project and manipulate emotions. A talent feared by many cultures, especially the emotionally reserved Frostborn. They ran until Jonas's lungs burned in the frigid air, only stopping when they reached the edge of a vast chasm that split the forest like a wound. Spanning this gap was the ice bridge, a natural formation of compressed snow and ice that provided the only crossing for many kilometers in either direction. "We need to cross," Jonas told Ira between gasping breaths. "On the other side, we can reach the eastern ridge. There's a system of caves there where we can hide." As they approached the bridge, a new sound cut through the howling wind: the distinctive hum of a Frostborn drone, larger and more powerful than the extractor's units. Jonas looked up to see the massive, crystal-like structure hovering above the far end of the bridge, its sensors undoubtedly already detecting their presence. "Run!" a voice called from behind them. Jonas spun to see Carrick emerging from the trees, his ice-blue skin almost invisible against the snow, save for the dark armor he wore. The Blood Judge was alone, his blade drawn. "The bridge will not hold for long," Carrick warned, pointing to the drone. "It carries ice fire. It will melt the bridge." "Why are you helping us?" Jonas demanded, instinctively pulling Ira closer to his side. "I am not," Carrick replied, his expression unreadable. "I am upholding the greater law. The Marked One is Frostborn, whatever her affliction. The soul extractors have no claim to her." As if to emphasize his point, Carrick suddenly hurled his ceremonial spear toward the drone with astonishing accuracy. The weapon struck one of the drone's propulsion units, sending it spiraling toward the chasm below, but not before it released a stream of glowing blue energy: ice fire, a substance that burned cold instead of hot, instantly beginning to dissolve the bridge. "Now we run," Carrick stated, already moving toward the rapidly deteriorating crossing. Jonas lifted Ira into his arms and followed, the 3 of them racing across the ice bridge as it literally melted away beneath their feet. Chunks of ice broke free behind them, plummeting into the darkness below. The cold burn of the ice fire reached them, even as they ran, the air crystallizing in their lungs with each desperate breath. They were meters from safety when the bridge gave a final, thunderous crack. Jonas felt the surface drop beneath him, but before he could fall, a powerful hand gripped his jacket, hauling him and Ira onto solid ground as the last of the bridge collapsed. Carrick stood on the edge, his breathing heavy, looking back at the now impassable chasm. "The extractors will find another way across," he said matter-of-factly. "But it will take them time. We should move." "We?" Jonas questioned, setting Ira down but keeping a protective hand on her shoulder. "For now," Carrick confirmed. "The caves are this way." With few options and the light fading, Jonas decided to follow the blood judge, though he remained wary, keeping Ira close as they traversed the rocky terrain toward the eastern ridge. The cave system was extensive, a network of ice-walled chambers that wound deep into the mountain. Carrick led them to a particular cavern, larger than the others, its walls inscribed with ancient frostborn symbols that glowed with a faint blue luminescence. "The Hall of Judgment," Carrick explained, seeing Jonas's questioning look. "A sacred place to my people. The soul extractors will not desecrate it by entering, should they find the entrance." "And you?" Jonas asked. "Aren't you desecrating it by bringing us here? By helping the marked one you were sent to retrieve?" Carrick's expression remained impassive, but his voice carried a hint of uncertainty Jonas hadn't heard before. "I was sent to uphold the law. The law states the marked must be returned to the ice. It does not specify which ice." It was a technicality, a narrow interpretation that allowed Carrick to justify his actions to himself. Jonas decided not to press the point, focusing instead on establishing a temporary camp in the relative safety of the cave. While Jonas worked, Ira wandered to the inscribed walls, her small fingers tracing the glowing symbols with evident fascination. Carrick watched her, his usual stoicism giving way to a subtle curiosity. "She recognizes the old language," he observed. "How is this possible for one so young and marked?" "What do these symbols mean?" Jonas asked, ignoring the question he couldn't answer. Carrick approached the wall, pointing to a particular sequence of glyphs. "This tells the story of the first marking," he explained. "When the Frostborn discovered that some among them possessed the power to influence emotions, to create flares of feeling that could overwhelm the unprepared mind." He moved to another section of text. "These flare-marked were feared, for they threatened the emotional discipline that allows our people to survive in this harsh world. The elders decided such individuals must be returned to the ice before their powers could disrupt the harmony of the clan. They killed children for being different," Jonas translated bluntly. "They preserved the greater peace," Carrick countered, though with less conviction than before. "Or so we were taught." Ira had stopped at a particular symbol, larger than the others, depicting a snowflake with flames emanating from its core. She placed her hand over it, and to the astonishment of both adults, the symbol brightened, the blue glow intensifying to a vivid silver that matched her eyes. "The mark of the flare judge," Carrick whispered, visibly shaken. "The symbol of one who could balance ice and fire, emotion and discipline. It is a myth, a story told to younglings." "Not a myth," Jonas said, nodding toward Ira, whose hand remained on the glowing symbol, her expression one of deep concentration. She recognized it. She activated it somehow. Carrick took a step back, his composure briefly faltering. "If she is truly a flare judge, then the marking was a grave error. Such a one is not cursed but blessed, meant to guide our people, not be cast out." Jonas was about to respond when a distant boom echoed through the cave system, an explosion at one of the outer entrances. "The extractors," Carrick stated, regaining his focus. "They have found us sooner than I anticipated. We need to contact the Galactic Council," Jonas decided, pulling a compact communication device from his pack. "It's our only chance now." The transmitter was a basic model, designed for emergency use, with limited range. Jonas activated it, adjusting the frequency to the Council's emergency band. "This is Jonas Dunn, human resident of Frostorn, requesting immediate assistance." He spoke into the device. "I have with me a child, a flare-marked, being pursued by soul extractors, and at risk from Frostborn law. We need evacuation. Urgently. For several tense moments, only Static answered his plea. Then, a clipped, professional voice responded. Galactic Council receiving. Verification of flare mark status required for priority intervention. Before Jonas could respond, Ira approached the transmitter, placing her small hand upon it. Immediately, the device warmed, its lights flickering in patterns that matched her pulse. Verification confirmed, the Council voice stated after a moment, sounding slightly odd. Emotional signature detected. Initiating emergency protocol. Extraction vessel will rendezvous at Zone 3 border in 12 standard hours. Can you reach these coordinates? The transmitter displayed a map location. The demilitarized zone where Frostborn territory met the neutral region, patrolled by Council peacekeepers. Yes, Jonas confirmed, studying the route. We can make it, but we'll need cover from pursuit. Understood. Diversion drones will be deployed to confuse tracking systems. Proceed with caution. Council out. As the transmission ended, another explosion rocked the cave, closer this time, sending small ice crystals raining down from the ceiling. We must move, Carrick urged. The extractors are persistent, and they are not alone. What do you mean? Jonas asked, hurriedly repacking their supplies. My queen has taken a personal interest in this matter, Carrick explained grimly. Empress Valora herself has joined the hunt. She brings with her the Imperial Guard. The gravity of this news was clear. The highest authority among the Frostborn was now directly involved, escalating what had been a matter of traditional law into a direct confrontation with the throne itself. Why would the Empress care about one child? Jonas questioned, as they moved deeper into the cave system, seeking an alternate exit. Because, Carrick replied solemnly, if the Marked One truly is a flare judge, she represents a challenge to the Empress's absolute authority. No true flare judge has been born to our people in 7 generations. Their coming is said to herald a time of great change. They had reached a narrow passage that Carrick indicated would lead them toward their destination. As they prepared to enter, a commanding voice echoed through the chamber behind them. Blood Judge Carrick, the voice called, cold and imperious. You disappoint me. They turned to see a tall, regal figure standing at the chamber's main entrance, Empress Valora. Her ice-blue skin adorned with intricate patterns of silver, her elaborate headdress marking her supreme status among the Frostborn. Behind her stood 4 Imperial Guards, their crystalline armor gleaming in the blue light of the cave. My Empress, Carrick acknowledged, bowing his head slightly, but maintaining his position between Valora and the child. You protect the Marked One, Valora observed, her voice carrying the same harmonic quality as Carrick's, but pitched higher, almost musical in its cold precision. You, who have enforced the law of marking for 30 cycles. Explain yourself. The child bears the sign of the Flare Judge, Carrick stated simply. I serve a higher law than even yours. My Empress. Valora's expression remained impassive, but her eyes, pale as winter ice, narrowed slightly. Myths and legends, Blood Judge. The Flare Judges are stories we tell to remind us of balance. They are not flesh. See for yourself, Carrick challenged, gesturing to Ira, who stood surprisingly calm between the 2 adults, her silver eyes fixed on the Empress. Valora took a single step forward, her gaze meeting Ira's. For a moment, the cave fell utterly silent, even the distant sounds of the extractor's approach fading to nothing. Then, unexpectedly, Ira moved toward the Empress, shrugging off Jonas's protective hand. The child stopped halfway between her protectors and Valora, her small form dwarfed by the towering Frostborn ruler. The Marked does not speak, Valora noted dismissively. How can one judge without voice? As if in response to the challenge, Ira raised her hands, palms upward. The air around her began to shimmer, just as it had during the confrontation with the soul extractors. But this time, The effect was more controlled, more deliberate. The temperature in the cave plummeted further, so cold that even the Frostborn guards shifted uncomfortably. Frost patterns formed on the walls, intricate designs that matched the symbols of the ancient text. Simultaneously, small flames, not of destructive fire but of concentrated emotional energy, danced above Ira's upturned palms, casting the cave in an otherworldly, silver-blue light. Jonas felt a wave of emotion wash over him, not the fear he had experienced before, but something more complex, understanding, compassion, and beneath it all, a steel-like determination that belied Ira's small stature and apparent vulnerability. The Imperial Guards reacted visibly to the emotional projection, their disciplined formation wavering as each processed the unexpected sensations. Two stepped back involuntarily, while another dropped to one knee, overcome. Only Valora remained outwardly unmoved, though Jonas thought he detected a flicker of uncertainty in her icy gaze. "Parlor tricks," the Empress declared, but her voice lacked its former conviction. "The marked manipulates base emotions to create illusion." "Not illusion," Carrick countered, watching in awe as the pattern of frost and flame spread across the cave floor, forming a perfect replica of the flare judge symbol that Ira had activated earlier. "Truth. The oldest truth of our people, that ice without fire brings only death, and fire without ice brings only chaos." Valora stood motionless, surrounded by the manifestation of Ira's power, her guards now all on their knees, their weapons lowered. For the first time, an expression crossed the Empress's face, a complex mixture of fear and wonder. "Perhaps," she conceded finally, removing her ceremonial gauntlet and revealing a hand as elegant as it was deadly. "I have been mistaken." The admission, from one who had never acknowledged error, hung in the air between them. Then, Valora's expression hardened once more. "But you will not escape your fate so easily, Marked One," she continued, replacing her gauntlet. "The path you walk leads only to greater trials." With that cryptic statement, the Empress turned and exited the chamber, her guards struggling to their feet to follow, still visibly affected by Ira's emotional projection. As soon as they were gone, Ira's manifestation faded, the frost receding, the flames extinguishing. The child swayed slightly, exhausted by the effort, and Jonas rushed forward to catch her before she could fall. "That was incredible," he murmured, lifting her gently. "But we need to move. Valora's retreat is tactical, not permanent." "Agreed," Carrick said, already moving toward the narrow passage. "The Empress never surrenders. She merely changes strategy, and the soul extractors still pursue us." With Ira secure in Jonas's arms, they entered the passage, leaving behind the ancient chamber and its revelations. The tunnel wound downward, occasionally branching, with Carrick confidently selecting their path based on markings only he could interpret. After what seemed like hours of descent, they emerged into a vast underground cavern, its ceiling so high it was lost in darkness, its floor covered in smooth, polished ice that reflected their forms like a perfect mirror. "The Heart of Winter," Carrick named it. "From here, we can access passages that lead directly to the Zone 3 border." As they crossed the reflective floor, Jonas noticed something alarming. The ice beneath their feet was vibrating subtly, the reflections distorting with each tremor. "What's happening?" he asked, tightening his hold on Ira. "Resonance charges," Carrick explained grimly. "The soul extractors are attempting to collapse the cavern system." No sooner had he spoken than a massive boom echoed through the space, and a section of ceiling crashed down, blocking the passage they had just exited. "They're sealing us in," Jonas realized, "cutting off our escape routes." There, Carrick pointed to a narrow fissure in the far wall, barely visible in the dim light. "That will lead us out, but we must hurry." Another explosion rocked the cavern, larger chunks of ice raining down around them. They ran, sliding across the polished floor as the beautiful space disintegrated around them. The fissure was their only hope now, a slim chance at reaching the Council's extraction point. They had almost reached it when a final detonation, closer and more powerful than the others, sent a shockwave through the ice beneath their feet. The floor cracked, a jagged line racing toward them with frightening speed. "Jump!" Carrick shouted, launching himself toward the fissure. Jonas followed, clutching Ira tightly as they leapt across the widening gap. He landed hard on the other side, rolling to protect the child from the impact. Carrick reached down, hauling them both to their feet and into the narrow passage just as the magnificent ice floor collapsed entirely, leaving nothing but a yawning abyss behind them. "That was too close," Jonas gasped, checking to ensure Ira was unharmed. "Thank you." Carrick merely nodded, already moving forward through the cramped space. "Save your gratitude for when we reach safety." The fissure eventually widened into a tunnel, sloping gradually upward. After another hour of careful progress, they began to see natural light filtering down from above. They were nearing the surface. Carrick halted suddenly, raising a hand for silence. From somewhere ahead came the unmistakable mechanical whir of surveillance drones. Not the crude extractor units they had encountered earlier, but the sleek, advanced models employed by the Frostborn military. "The Empress has positioned her forces between us and the Zone 3 border," Carrick concluded. "We must find another route." "There isn't time," Jonas argued, checking the chronometer on his wrist display. "The Council extraction vessel will arrive in less than 2 hours. If we're not at the rendezvous point, they'll leave without us." Carrick considered this, his pale eyes narrowed in thought. "Then we must create a diversion." Before Jonas could ask what he meant, the Blood Judge removed a small device from his armor, a Frostborn communication unit, still active and linked to the military network. "This will broadcast our position," Carrick explained, "but not our actual position. I can program it to emit a signal matching the Marked One's energy signature, drawing the drones and guards away from our true path." "They'll realize it's a trick eventually," Jonas pointed out. "Eventually," Carrick agreed, "but not immediately. It will buy us the time we need." While Carrick worked on the device, Jonas reconnected the Council transmitter, confirming their approach to the rendezvous coordinates and updating their situation. "Council receiving." The same professional voice responded. "Be advised. Extraction vessel is en route. Expected arrival in 1 hour, 43 minutes. Scanning shows significant Frostborn military presence in your approach vector. Proceed with extreme caution." "Can you provide any assistance?" Jonas asked, watching as Carrick finished programming the decoy. "Negative. Direct intervention would violate sovereignty agreements. However, atmospheric conditions may experience unexpected fluctuations that could affect sensor efficiency in approximately 20 minutes. It was as close to help as the Council could offer, without officially interfering in Frostborn affairs. A deliberate meteorological disturbance to reduce the effectiveness of the military's tracking systems. "Understood, we'll be there. Done out." Carrick activated the decoy device and placed it in a small side passage, angled to project its signal toward the eastern perimeter, away from their intended route. "We wait 5 minutes for it to be detected," he said. "Then we move, fast and silent, toward the border." The wait was agonizing, each second bringing the Council vessel closer, but also depleting their narrow window of opportunity. Finally, Carrick gave the signal, and they began their ascent toward the surface. They emerged into the fading daylight of Frosthorn's brief afternoon, the wind carrying the first hints of the promised atmospheric disturbance, dark clouds gathering with unnatural speed, the air pressure dropping perceptibly. "The border is there." Carrick pointed to a ridgeline approximately 2 kilometers distant, marked by the subtle shimmer of a sovereignty boundary, the invisible line where Frostborn territory ended and the Council's neutral zone began. Between them and safety lay an exposed stretch of icefield, offering no cover, no place to hide should the decoy fail to draw away all pursuit. "We'll have to run for it," Jonas decided, shifting Ira to a more secure position on his back. When the storm hits, we go. Straight across. They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, the artificially induced storm unleashed its fury. Wind howling across the ice. Snow swirling in blinding sheets. Lightning crackling between the clouds, disrupting electronic systems below. "Now!" Jonas shouted above the tempest, and they broke cover, running full tilt across the treacherous terrain. Visibility was near zero, the storm concealing them, but also making navigation perilous. Jonas relied on the council transmitter's directional indicator, a simple arrow pointing toward their destination. Trusting it would lead them true, even as ice particles stung his face and the wind threatened to knock him from his feet. They had covered perhaps half the distance when the storm briefly abated, a momentary lull in the manufactured chaos. In that brief window of visibility, Jonas spotted trouble, a squadron of Frostborn guards, having realized the deception, racing toward them from the east, while behind them, the distinctive black forms of soul extractors emerged from another entrance to the cave system. "They've found us," Jonas called to Carrick, who had already spotted the danger. "Keep running," the Blood Judge commanded. "Get the child to the border. I will delay them." "You can't face them alone," Jonas protested. "I am Blood Judge," Carrick stated simply, drawing his ceremonial blade. "My authority will force them to engage formally, one at a time. It will buy you minutes, perhaps enough." Before Jonas could argue further, Carrick handed him something, a small, intricately carved ice crystal, glowing with the same blue light as the ancient symbols in the cave. "Give this to the Marked One when she is safe," he instructed. "It contains our true history, not the version Valora would preserve. The child should know her heritage, whatever path she walks." With that, Carrick turned to face the approaching guards, his tall form standing defiant against the swirling snow. "Now go!" Jonas hesitated only a moment before continuing toward the border, Ira clinging tightly to his back. Behind them, he heard Carrick's voice raised in the formal challenge of single combat, a tradition the Imperial Guard would be bound to honor, however reluctantly. The storm intensified again, obscuring the scene, driving Jonas forward through sheer force of will. The border marker grew closer, the shimmer of the sovereignty boundary, now clearly visible just ahead. 100 meters from safety, a new threat materialized from the storm. A sleek, predatory drone, more advanced than any Jonas had yet encountered. It hovered directly in their path, its sensors locked on Ira, weapons ports open and ready. "Halt!" commanded a voice from the drone, Empress Valora's, transmitted from wherever she monitored the pursuit. "Surrender the Marked One, and you may cross the border unharmed, human." Jonas stopped, panting, knowing the drone could strike them down in an instant if he tried to run. Ira slid from his back, standing beside him, her silver eyes fixed on the hovering threat. "She's not yours to take," Jonas responded, placing a protective arm around Ira's shoulders. "She's a person, not property." "She is Frostborn," Valora's voice countered. "Our laws apply, even at this border." "Your laws abandoned her," Jonas argued. "You gave up any claim when you marked her and left her to die." The drone descended slightly, weapons humming with potential energy. "A final warning, human, step aside." Jonas stood his ground, preparing for the worst. But before the drone could act, something unexpected happened. Ira stepped forward, directly beneath the hovering machine. The air around her began to shimmer once more, the now familiar manifestation of her emotional projection, but with an intensity Jonas hadn't witnessed before. The storm itself seemed to respond, snow swirling around her small form, not in chaotic patterns but in deliberate, controlled spirals. The drone systems flickered, its weapons ports cycling open and closed as though confused. From its speaker came not Valora's voice, but bursts of static, broken by what sounded like expressions of pain. Ira raised her hands, and Jonas felt it, a wave of pure emotion, so powerful it staggered him despite not being its target. It wasn't fear this time, nor the complex blend of understanding and determination she had projected in the cave. This was something more primal, more absolute, a declaration of selfhood, of right to exist, of freedom. The drone convulsed in midair, its sleek form contorting as though under immense pressure. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, it simply came apart, components falling harmlessly to the snow around Ira, who stood untouched in the center of the destruction. For a moment, there was silence, even the storm seeming to pause in acknowledgement of what had occurred. Then, from the direction they had come, Jonas heard the sounds of combat, Carrick, still holding the line. "We need to go," he urged, reaching for Ira's hand. "The border is right there." Together, they covered the remaining distance, passing through the sovereignty boundary with a subtle tingle of energy. They had made it to Zone 3, to the relative safety of Council territory. Jonas didn't slow until they had put another 100 meters between themselves and the border. Finally, stopping to catch his breath, he turned to look back. Through the diminishing storm, he could make out figures at the boundary, Frostborn guards, soul extractors, all halted at the line they could not legally cross without risking interplanetary incident. Of Carrick, there was no sign. The Council transmitter chimed, drawing Jonas's attention. "Extraction vessel on final approach," the voice informed him. "Proceed to the designated coordinates for immediate retrieval." A map appeared on the small screen, directing them to a clearing just ahead, where the ship could land safely. With a final glance back toward the border, Jonas took Ira's hand, and they made their way toward the rendezvous point. The Council vessel descended as they arrived. A sleek, silver craft bearing the neutral emblem of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Its boarding ramp extended smoothly, and a pair of officials emerged, a human woman and a tall, multi-limbed being of a species Jonas didn't recognize. "Jonas Dunn?" the woman called. "And the flare-marked child?" "Yes," Jonas confirmed, approaching cautiously, still wary after everything they had endured. "I'm Commander Lane, Galactic Council Special Protection Division." The woman introduced herself. "We're here to transport you to Haven, a safe colony, under Council protection." "What about the soul extractors?" Jonas asked, noting movement at the border behind them. "And the Frostborn military? They won't just let this go." "The Council has officially registered the child as a protected person under the Sentient Rights Accord," Lane explained. "Any attempt to seize her would constitute a direct violation of interplanetary law, something neither the extractors nor the Frostborn can afford diplomatically." While they spoke, the non-human official approached Ira, crouching to be at her eye level. The being communicated in a series of melodic tones that somehow conveyed meaning directly to the mind, a form of emotional language not unlike Ira's projections. To Jonas's surprise, Ira responded in kind, not with sound, but with subtle shifts in the emotional field around her, which the official seemed to understand perfectly. "Remarkable," Lane commented, observing the exchange. "Consul Thray says the child has a natural aptitude for emotive communication. She's explaining what happened to her. Abandoned due to her abilities. Rescued by you. Pursued by those who feared and those who coveted her power." "She can't speak?" Jonas asked, realizing he had never heard Ira use verbal language. "Not in the conventional sense," Lane clarified. "The Consul believes she communicates primarily through emotional projection, a rare ability even among flare-marked individuals. With training, she might develop vocal speech, but her natural language is far more visceral." The non-human official, Consul Thray, concluded the conversation with Ira and approached Jonas, communicating through the same emotional wavelength. This time, Jonas felt gratitude, respect, and a formal request. "The Consul asks if you would accompany the child to Haven," Lane translated, though Jonas had already understood the essence of the message. She has formed a bond with you that would ease her transition. The council would, of course, provide for all your needs. Jonas looked at Ira, who was watching him intently, her silver eyes reflecting a depth of feeling that transcended ordinary communication. In the short time since he had found her half frozen in the snow, she had transformed from a dying child to a being of extraordinary potential. And he had changed too, from a solitary scavenger to someone who would risk everything to protect another. "I'll come," he decided. She shouldn't be alone. Relief and joy emanated from Ira, so palpable that both council officials smiled involuntarily, affected by the projection. As they boarded the vessel, Jonas remembered the crystal Carrick had entrusted to him. He removed it from his pocket, its blue glow seemingly brighter now, and handed it to Ira. "This is from Carrick," he explained, unsure how much she understood of spoken language. "He wanted you to have it. Your heritage, your history." Ira took the crystal carefully, holding it to her chest for a moment before placing it securely in the pocket of the oversized clothes she still wore. The gesture spoke of understanding and gratitude beyond words. The extraction vessel lifted off smoothly, rising above the storm clouds that still lingered over the border. From this height, Jonas could see the vast expanse of Frosthorn, the endless snowfields, the jagged mountains, the isolated communities of the native clans. It had been his home for 5 years, a place of solitude and survival, never of connection or purpose. Now, looking at the small, violet-skinned child seated beside him, he felt something he hadn't experienced in longer than he could remember: hope for a future different from the past. Haven lived up to its name. The council colony was situated on a temperate world with rolling hills, dense forests, and clear, flowing rivers, as different from Frosthorn as could be imagined. The settlement itself was a harmonious blend of architecture from dozens of species, each bringing their unique cultural elements to create a truly integrated community. As the transport shuttle descended toward the colony's main landing pad, Jonas watched Ira's reaction. The child pressed her face to the viewport, silver eyes wide with wonder at the vibrant colors of the landscape below, so different from the monochromatic whites and blues of her birth world. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Jonas said, smiling at her evident amazement. "And warm. You won't turn blue here unless you want to." Ira turned to him, projecting a complex mixture of excitement, nervous anticipation, and deep gratitude that needed no translation. The shuttle touched down gently, and Commander Lane approached them as the boarding ramp extended. "Welcome to Haven," she said warmly. "Your new home, for as long as you choose to stay." They were greeted at the landing pad by a small delegation, officials, medical personnel, and several children of various species who had gathered out of curiosity to see the new arrivals. Ira hesitated at the top of the ramp, suddenly overwhelmed by the attention and the unfamiliar environment. Jonas knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he told her. "Take your time. These people are here to help you, to welcome you. No one will hurt you here." After a moment's consideration, Ira took a tentative step forward, then another, until she was walking beside Jonas down the ramp and onto the soil of Haven, her first steps on a world that would not reject her for being different. The waiting children, displaying the natural curiosity and acceptance of youth, approached immediately, fascinated by the newcomer with violet skin and silver eyes. One small human girl offered Ira a flower, a simple yellow bloom that seemed to capture the sun itself in its petals. Ira accepted the gift with evident wonder, touching the soft petals as though they were the most precious artifact in the galaxy. Then, to Jonas's surprise and delight, she projected a gentle wave of gratitude and joy that made all the children giggle, as though tickled from within. "She's making us happy," one exclaimed, delighted by the novel sensation. "Can you do other feelings too?" asked another. Ira nodded, and a moment later, the children were squealing with exaggerated fear that was clearly playful, rather than genuine. A game of emotional tag that transcended linguistic barriers. "She'll integrate well," noted a tall, elegant woman, who had approached while Jonas watched the children's interaction. "I'm Dr. Alara Voss, head of Haven's Exceptional Development Program. The council has asked me to oversee the child's education and training." "What exactly will that involve?" Jonas asked, instantly protective. "She's been through enough already. She needs time to just be a child." "I couldn't agree more," Dr. Voss assured him. "The program is designed to help children with unique abilities develop at their own pace, in an environment of safety and acceptance. Play, creativity, and emotional well-being are our priorities. The technical training, helping her understand and control her projective abilities, will come naturally, through activities she enjoys." Jonas relaxed slightly, watching as Ira and the other children moved toward a nearby playground, already engaged in some complicated game that seemed to involve projecting and guessing emotions. "And what about me?" he asked. "What's my role here?" "That's entirely up to you," Dr. Voss replied. "The council recognizes the bond you've formed with Ira. She trusts you completely, a remarkable achievement given what she's experienced. If you wish to remain her guardian, we would fully support that arrangement." "Guardian," Jonas repeated, testing the word. After years of answering to no one, responsible for nothing but his own survival, the concept of guardianship, of being responsible for another life, should have terrified him. Instead, it felt right, as though a missing piece had finally clicked into place. "Yes, I'd like that." "Excellent," Dr. Voss smiled. "There's something else I'd like to discuss with you as well. The Council is establishing a new initiative called Project Hearthlight, a program to identify and protect children like Ira throughout the galaxy, particularly those at risk due to cultural prejudices or exploitation. Your experience with the Frostborn and the Soul Extractors would be invaluable to such an effort." Jonas looked out at the playground, where Ira was now sitting in a circle with several other children, apparently teaching them how to project simple emotional patterns. Her silver eyes were bright with animation, her small hands gesturing expressively, so different from the frozen, silent child he had found in the snow. "I'm in," he decided. "Whatever I can do to help prevent what almost happened to her from happening to others." In the days that followed, Jonas and Ira settled into their new life on Haven. They were provided with a comfortable dwelling near the colony's educational center, where Ira began her formal integration into the Exceptional Development Program. Jonas, meanwhile, started working with the Project Hearthlight team, sharing his knowledge of Frostborn culture and Soul Extractor tactics. Ira's progress was remarkable. Within weeks, she had begun to develop verbal speech, though she still preferred emotional projection for complex communications. Her ability to control and focus her projections grew daily, allowing her to communicate specific thoughts and images rather than just raw emotions. Most significantly, she began to express herself through art, creating vivid, swirling paintings that somehow managed to convey emotional states visually. Her favorite subject was rainbow skies, so different from the monochrome heavens of Frostorn, each color representing a different feeling in her expanding emotional vocabulary. 3 months after their arrival, a ceremony was held in Haven's Central Plaza. Ira, now recognized throughout the colony for her extraordinary abilities and gentle spirit, was formally designated as the First Flame of Haven, a symbolic title acknowledging her role as the foundation of what would become a sanctuary for flare-marked children from across the galaxy. As part of the ceremony, a small statue was unveiled in the plaza, a bronze sculpture depicting a small child holding a lantern, standing beside a tall figure in a protective stance. The plaque at its base read, "She was never just a child. She was the flame that taught us to feel." The crystal Carrick had entrusted to them proved to be more than a simple historical record. When Ira finally learned to access its contents, it revealed the true history of the flare-marked among the Frostborn, not as cursed outsiders, but as emotional guides meant to balance the necessary discipline of Iceworld survival with the warmth of compassion and connection. News eventually reached Haven that change had begun on Frosthorn itself. Carrick had survived the confrontation at the border and returned to the Ice Court with a formal challenge to the law of marking. The revelation that a true flare judge had been born, and nearly lost, had created ripples throughout Frostborn society, with younger clan members particularly vocal in questioning traditional practices. Empress Valora maintained her power, but reports suggested her absolute authority had been subtly undermined. Surveillance imagery showed her watching recordings of Ira's progress on Haven, her expression an unreadable mixture of resentment and reluctant fascination. 1 year after their dramatic escape, Jonas and Ira stood on the observation deck of a new vessel, a council research ship emblazoned with the symbol of Project Hearthlight, a burning snowflake, representing the balance of discipline and emotion, strength and vulnerability. "Ready for our first mission?" Jonas asked, crouching to be at eye level with his ward. Ira nodded, her silver eyes bright with purpose. "Ready," she said aloud, her voice still soft but gaining confidence with each passing day. Simultaneously, she projected a complex emotional message that transcended words. Excitement for the journey ahead, determination to help others like herself, and deep gratitude for the chain of events that had brought them together. The ship hummed to life around them, preparing to depart for a distant star system where reports suggested a flare-marked child was at risk. As they watched Haven recede below them, Jonas reflected on how far they had come since that fateful day in the frozen forest. What had begun as a simple act of compassion, the rescue of a small, blue-tinged body from certain death, had sparked a movement that would potentially transform multiple worlds. And, at the center of it all was Ira, no longer the abandoned, marked child, but a beacon of hope for others who had been cast aside for being different. As the ship accelerated toward the stars, Ira placed her small hand in Jonas's larger one, projecting a single, pure emotion. Home. Not a place, but a connection. The unbreakable bond between two beings who had found each other across the void and changed each other irrevocably in the process. In that moment, Jonas understood the truth that the Frostborn had forgotten. True strength came not from isolation and emotional discipline, but from connection and compassion. It was a lesson he would carry with him across the stars, a flame of hope in a sometimes cold and unforgiving universe.